have the minutes dated March 16, 2016. Is there a motion to approve? Any questions or comments or changes? If none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We'll move on to regular agenda. Number one, first item is special use permit. Consider a request for a special use permit for Grow and Adventure Childcare located at 3137 12th Avenue West. The site is located on Lot 3, Block 3 of Cook Meadow Hills, First Edition. Is there anyone here present to address the board?
Morning.
Morning.
Well, I currently have a family daycare.
Can you state your name?
Oh, my name's
name-
Ivy Gonzalez. The address is 3137 12th Avenue West.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. I currently have a family daycare here and want to expand into a group daycare. Just because I see that daycare is needed and childcare is needed, so I think expanding would be a good opportunity for not just me, but the community.
Okay. Is there any questions for Ivy at all?
Have you talked to your neighbors?
I did not speak to any neighbors, but they all am aware that I do have a family daycare, and I'm sure they were aware of the permit via email.
They were probably notified, huh?
Yes, yes.
Any other questions? Steve, do you have comment?
Well, I guess I can give my staff report, or do you want to wait after public comment?
However you want to, we can
Okay.
take public comment first if you'd like.
Okay, that
Okay, all
works.
right.
Just to let you know, the question, to Commissioner Jackson's question, we did do the notice. We send out notice to everyone within 300 feet, and I received no phone calls or messages about this, one way or the other.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one.
Sure.
But just while Ivy's there, did you read through the conditions of approval?
I did.
Do you have any questions, or are those clear, or are you okay?
No,
with
it was yeah, it was very clear.
those? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on this? Nobody? Steve?
Yes, Steve Josephson, City County Planner, and you have before you a request for a special use permit for a group daycare, and this would be special use permit SUP 00216. And this is a request to expand to 12 children, which requires under our ordinance, a group child care. She's already operating a child care center that, the family child care. This requires a special use permit. You have the conditions in front of you on page 3. They're fairly standard. It limits the number of children and hours of operation. The one thing that they will need to do, and this is a state requirement, is they will need to build an opaque fence in the backyard. That's a state requirement for child care centers. Staff recommends approval subject to the conditions before you, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And we have been working with Ms. Gonzalez for several months, and we did share the conditions, the conditions of approval with her, and she had no objections.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody have any questions for Steve?
Just one question, Steve. Is 5:30 a standard quitting time? It seems like that's pretty close to when people are just getting off work to get there and get their kids. And I mean, are we restricting her by saying 5:30?
You know, that's, the times that we get are the times that we get from the applicants. So
Okay.
we asked her, what are your hours of operation? You know, what are your hours of operation? And that was the time that she felt comfortable with. You know, we tend to craft these with how they operate their child care center. If Ms. Gonzalez feels like she needs an extra half hour or something, do you want to come up and address that, Ms. Gonzalez? You come to the mic so you're on the record, please.
I do give them a 30 minutes, so I guess you can say 6 o'clock, because you're right, they do get off at 5:30, so 6 o'clock around there. 5:45 is when they do come and pick up the kids.
Yeah, staff has no objection to that. We'll amend it, and when there's a motion made, just to state that it's subject to the conditions as amended.
Sure, so we can make it 6 then.
Yes.
All right.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Maximum number of employees shall be limited to 3. Why would we have that?
That's the number of employees that she plans to hire, and the reason why is because the number of employees she has dictates the number of parking spaces that she has. So and that's the way that her plan is drawn up, so that she has enough parking spaces for her employees. If we go beyond it, then she has to, for every employee she has, she's got to provide another space, and that needs to be part of the plan that she has. That's why we restrict.
The reason I ask is because it's obvious it takes more care time for infants than well, all the way up till 12, holy cow,
I believe Commissioner Elkin there are state requirements that govern that and the maximum number of employees. So anything that Ms. Gonzalez is going to ask for is going to follow whatever those state guidelines are going to be. Am I correct about that, Ms. Gonzalez?
That's correct.
I
Thank
think
you.
the reason that we also address that is that we also don't want, it isn't a residential neighborhood, so we don't necessarily want to create a daycare situation where, in a home where it has 10 employees. So
Understandable,
it's just to
yeah.
keep it, so it winds up being a good neighbor, and I think, Ms. Gonzalez understands that. We visited extensively about that. That's why we have to limit it. It's not really to be restrictive. It's to wind up being an operation that she wants to run, but also one that you would want to live next to.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Still nobody in the public? Anybody would like to speak? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve, subject to the conditions of staff, as amended.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will move on to item number 2, special use permit. To consider a request for a special use permit for Mimi's Playhouse Daycare at 997 29th Street West. The site is located on Lot 22, Block 5 of Country Oaks Estate Edition. Party present, please come forward.
Hi, I'm Mary Barrett. I live at 997 29th Street West. I'm currently running an in-home daycare, a family in-home daycare, and I'm looking to get a special use permit to go group. Sorry, I'm nervous.
Okay. Is there any questions for Mary?
Same question. Is 5:30 good, or would you prefer 6?
Well, 99.9% of the time, the parents are on time, but I guess maybe 6 just in case of bad weather and whatnot, Something happened, I guess I would have to change it to 6.
And have you heard, I see you've got several actually letters in here in support. Have you heard anything against?
No.
Okay.
No, I've talked to some of the neighbors beforehand. They said they would submit a letter, but they never did. They were fine with it.
Yeah.
So, but the ones that did submit the letter, I made sure y'all had copies of.
Sure, thanks. Any other questions for Mary?
Mary, same question for you.
Sure.
Online. Same question for you, Mary. You did read the conditions of approval, and you agree with those and understand them?
Yes, I
Okay,
did.
thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on this? If none, Steve?
Steve Josephson, City County Planner, and you have in front of you another request for a group child care center. And Ms. Barrett's been working with us for a while on this. She wants to expand. Just for Commissioner Friedrich, I did get one phone call from somebody else on her block. He lived a few houses away, and once I described what he wanted to do, he had no objection. He had no objection to what she wanted to do there. It's the same, similar conditions, except they already have a fence in the backyard, and staff doesn't object to extending the hours to, to 6 o'clock. One comment I do want to make with our applicants today, with the 3 that I'm working on, is they're the first 3 to come in under our new system where we ask the agencies to get their agency comments first and work everything out, and they were all extremely diligent and cooperative in getting that done, and we appreciate it. I was able to get these staff reports done with a lot of input from them, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Steve. Anybody have any questions for Steve? No questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. Do you want to do the amendment on that one also with the time? Okay. I'll make a motion to approve then, the group daycare facility called Mimi's Playhouse.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We'll move on to item number 3. It's a special use permit to consider a request for a special use permit for a massage therapy practice at 230 4th Avenue West. The site is located on Lot 10 and the south 50 feet of Lot 11, Block D, Dakota Land and Colonization. Is the party present?
Hi.
Hi.
Jerry Uribe, 230 4th Avenue West in Dickinson.
Okay, go
Well,
ahead.
as the report says, I'd like to have a home office or home business. I'm a licensed and certified massage therapist. I've been working about 8 years. Recently moved from Virginia. And I guess I'm a professional volunteer also, so I have a lot of things that are going on, and I would just like the chance to work out of my home so that I can just kind of manage everything I do.
All right. Any questions for Mary? Or Jerry, I'm sorry. Jerry. Mary, last one. Any questions for Jerry? The only one I had when I read this, and I believe it was in this one here, was, did it say maximum of 3 people, 3 clients a day?
Yes, that would be my
You're okay
max.
with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I like the work. I just don't like to work too much.
All right. Okay. All right. Any questions for Jerry? Thank you. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on this? If none, Steve?
Yes, this is yes, Commissioner Steve Josephson, City County Planner. This is a request for a home occupation, and in the staff report, there's an explanation as to what that is. We do allow people to run certain businesses out of their home as long as it matches, as long as it's something where it doesn't resemble a commercial business and fits into the neighborhood. And I believe it's no more than 30% of their square footage of their house, their residence is used for the business. And Ms. Uribe had come to us several months ago and said, I want to be a massage therapist, but I don't want an office, and I want to limit the number of people I see per day. I want to pursue some other things, but I still want to keep my hand in this. Commissioners, you will find in front of you there are some amended conditions, and staff, after talking to Ms. Uribe, staff is proposing amending number 3 so that it's actually Monday through Saturday, and the 3 clients per day is something that Ms. Uribe had actually come up with herself. She'd expressed the desire that that was as many as she wanted to see per day, per day, and that would fit in with with what she wants to do at that location. One comment I will make in one of the conditions is about, there was a fire code inspection, there were a number of things that required correction, and, you had got an email from Mark Sally, our fire marshal, who said that he came back, did a re-inspection, and she had corrected those items, so she'll be able to go, if you do recommend approval of this per the conditions, then she can go forward to city commission at the earliest opportunity. And I have shared the conditions with Ms. Uribe, and she had no objections to them. She did go out and actually get letters from her neighbors to the north and south and east, and none of them, they were supportive of what she wants to do there. So staff recommends approval subject to those amended conditions that you have in front of you, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve? If none, can we have a motion?
Chairman, I'll move that we approve the Uribe SUP request with the amended conditions.
We have a motion, is there a second? The motion is second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Move on to number 4. This is another special use permit. To consider a request for a special use permit for a telecommunications tower at 1845 Empire Road. The site is located on Lot 1, Block 1 of Leisure Park State Avenue, replat of Blocks 1 through 3 of State Addition. Party present, please come forward. Hi.
Morning, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Cole Shantz, representing Buell Consulting, and on behalf of Dave Fisher, actually, too. He's the site acquisition person on this site. So, what we're trying to do is just take down an existing cell phone tower site that's at that and just build a new one there. So, called the Drop and Swap. And I know one thing that was kind of an issue yet is the leasing part of it, and the lease is with the Park District, and I just followed up before this meeting. It is signed and should be executed. It's with the attorney and should be on the way to Verizon, and we can definitely make that one of the conditions, of this before, receiving the permit. But that's the latest on the lease status. So, any other questions?
Well, that was
Free.
the only comment that I was going to
Okay.
have, is I
Sure.
probably should know that, but I wasn't quite positive if that
Right.
was all done. So I would like to make that a condition if we're going to approve.
Absolutely,
To
right.
make sure that that has been done.
Yep, and
Is there any other questions for Cole?
I guess my question is, a few months ago, there was a request for a tower west of here, a few hundred feet. Does this replace that request? Or is that request still in the works?
that I am not, I believe that, are you talking about the other one that was on city property then?
Yeah.
Instead of park?
Yeah.
Yes, so this one would be one and the same, then, right. So it's moved to
So there's
Park
not going to be two
District.
towers?
Right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for Cole?
Cole, you did, obviously, we'd be adding condition number 16 to address the lease with Park and Rec. The other 15 conditions, were you clear on those and
Right.
on board with those?
Mhm.
Okay.
Right, it would just be that additional condition as far as
All right. Thank
moving
you.
forward, so yes, sir.
Any other questions? If none, thank you, Cole.
Okay.
Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment on this? Hearing none. Walter?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This actually is probably a better option than what was discussed previously on the site for the campus of the West River Community Center. It will fit in. It is limited to 90 feet in height. That does not include the whip and lightning rod, It does require, there's a light required, a red light, so you will see a red light flashing on the top of it for the airport. They wanted that installed on there. Other than that, it is going to have lights for the baseball field on it, so we'll call it a stealth tower. It will look a little different than the rest of the light poles, obviously, but it will fit in. It's one of the conditions is meant to make the tower fit in with those other light poles so it doesn't stand out. They are doing some decorative fencing, as you're probably aware, around the facilities on site there. To access the site, they'll be using the trail system that's existing through the site there as right now. So there won't be any new additions to the site for access. It is a much better option. There hasn't been anybody that has called and inquired or much less had any problems with this facility, and staff would recommend approval with the addition of condition number 16 that a lease is signed and delivered to the planning department in this file prior to a building permit being issued for the pole.
Right, thank you, Walter.
Walter, if I could just add one thing. This is, Commissioners, this is going to be the last special use permit for a cell tower that you're going to see like this with all these conditions in it, because City Commission approved in second reading the amendments to the zoning code, so all the conditions, and you had gone through this, all the conditions that are in there now, they're just going to be in the code, so that it won't be quite as long, and we'll just have conditions specific to a tower location.
Thank you, Steve. Any other comments?
I have heard some talk that there's some possibility that those Mustang baseball fields could be relocated someday. And if that's the case, is this going to fit with any reuse or different use of that area?
That part I can't answer. I mean, yes, there's been talk. Honestly, I don't see that happening anywhere in the near future. Having said that, if things came back like they were, I mean, that could actually obviously come up quicker, but we really never talked about, I don't know that we would move it all out of there. I'm thinking we would probably add another more field somewhere else. I don't know that we would just leave that space, but I'm not 100% sure. That would be my idea, that we would still keep it and use it as a baseball fields. We would just have additional fields somewhere else to accommodate more kids.
Okay. Just wanted to bring that up.
And this location here, there is a light pole there currently. Now granted, this will be a lot taller, but that's really what it's replacing, is another light pole. So, any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the special use permit for the telecommunications tower.
With the addition of that number 16?
Right.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to number 5, which is a rezone to consider an amendment to the City of Dickinson zoning map to the property located at 51 3rd Street East. This 2.07 acre lot located on block 25 of original plat. Is there anybody here to address this? Steve?
Yes, good morning. Steve Josephson, County Planner. And I'm here on behalf of the Stark County Board of County Commissioners who've requested this amendment. The property that the county courthouse is currently set on is zoned high-density residential R3, and the request is to change this to public zoning. And the primary reason for this is currently the courthouse is a legal non-conforming use under the R3 zoning. Public governmental buildings are not a permitted use or even allowed as a special use under the R3 zoning. So by changing this to public, if in some time in the future, if there was any expansion of the courthouse facilities, they would not have to come back through and ask for something like an amendment to a non-conforming, a legal non-conforming use. It would just go to a permitted use, and this is really a more appropriate zoning district. This is the appropriate zoning district for the courthouse. The courthouse has been there for a number of decades. It fits in well with the surrounding neighborhood. There's no compatibility issues with changing this. I think the county commission has done a good job of blending in with the surrounding neighborhood. So the county commission asks that you recommend the approval of this request, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. We also have Commissioner Elkin here, who can answer questions about this too.
I need to also recuse myself from the vote in this matter, since I am a county commissioner.
Okay, is there any questions for Steve? None? I guess not, Steve, thanks.
All right, thanks. So Walter's not going to grill me on this.
Anybody from the public that would like to comment on this? Nobody? Walter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They should have mentioned it in the first item. If you notice, on each of the staff reports, you'll see a number. Like this one is REZ-001-16. One, we've instituted a numbering process for each application as it comes through. So if you make motions, you can use that number as well. And it's also a better way for us to track applications down the road. We do that annual review of all of our applications. And so anyway, if you'd like to use that, please feel free. On this application, yeah, as Steve pointed out, it is the natural designation that probably this site should have had when zoning was adopted in Dickinson. It is a more compatible, obviously, zoning. The area is conducive to it. I think the area has accepted the fact that the courthouse is located there, and in a future use or expansions, I think that the public probably acknowledges the fact that that may or may happen in the near future or not. And there hasn't been any comments from the public on this request, and staff would recommend approval.
Okay, thanks, Walter. Is there any questions for Walter? If none, is there a motion? Yes.
I move the city of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of REZ-001-16.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, commissioners.
We will move on to our work session, which has one item, commercial design standards.
Actually, we tricked you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh.
The city attorney Goff has a ordinance or proposed ordinance that relates to a court case that is going to mandate us changing our sign ordinance. So she was just going to introduce and discuss this handout real quick before we talk about the commercial district.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. As Mr. Hadley said, there was a Supreme Court case, U.S. Supreme Court case, Reed versus Town of Gilbert, that came out last year that related to sign ordinances and ensuring that there was not any content-based regulations, which would be unconstitutional. So it relates to calling out specific exceptions related to uses. So if you go to the third page of the proposed ordinance, things like bulletin boards for religious assembly or school uses implies that though the content of it will be related to religious assembly or school use, so then we're regulating the content. So it's taking out things like that and crafting it in a way that it allows it for specific times in some cases, like special events, but changes it to being allowed during that time rather than for that. So it could be anything on the sign, but more than likely it would be related to that, but not restricting the content so that it is constitutional under the law. So we will bring this at the next meeting for your actual recommendation. I just wanted to make you aware of it at this time.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
Is this more or less just cleaning up language within the ordinance is really what it is?
Yeah, that's exactly it, to make sure we're compliant with the case law.
But it appears that what we're reacting to is eliminating religious references for the most part.
Yeah, there's other things like real estate, construction. It's anything that deals with specific content. So it's not just religious.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on then. So we're still on commercial design standards then, or?
Yeah, that's where we're gonna end.
Okay,
We're gonna-
all right, go ahead.
I haven't added anything else, no. What you have in front of you is kind of a list of some design standards. Currently, we have, I believe, 6 overlay zones, and most of those overlay zones require a 300-foot from that location. So let's say Highway 22 north. So 300 feet from that Highway 22, we actually have design standards for structures. And what I'm thinking that we might want to do is just have a discussion on having overall design standards for commercially zoned properties throughout town. And the reason I say that is if you go 300 feet from Highway 22, you'll have, if you fall in that, you'll have design standards. If you're right behind that, at 325 feet away, you do not. And it's more of a question of what do we see the community wanting and supporting commercially down the road. And 300 feet isn't a long distance. It's very visible still. So I mean, 325 feet is definitely an area in that corridor that we've already identified as sensitive. I think if you look at our zoning map, I wish we still had one in here, that what you'll find is all those commercial areas are very visible from travel ways, very visible. We see them every day as we're traveling to and from work or wherever we go. I think that it probably would be a good step forward to just say our design standards are not difficult to follow. They're not real costly to follow. And I think that, you know, a good step forward would be to say, let's have these design standards or tweak them if we need to a little bit, and have them apply in all commercial zone districts. Now that being said, we have a downtown core that we're also looking, it's in the Renaissance zone, we're looking at creating a historic district. There may be some design standards that differ or are in addition to in that area down the road. But these standards would fall in place and handle all of our areas right now if you wanted to do that, excuse me. So I think it's important that we look at it. It's pretty typical to have overlay districts, that's correct, but it's also pretty typical that you have commercial design standards that apply uniformly through the community. And I have bounced it off the realtors group. I've bounced it off a number of contractors that have come in just in passing and talking on other issues. And a number of them have volunteered to come in and say, yeah, they'd like to come in and be cheerleaders in the back row, saying that they would like that as something to move forward on. Now, is that everyone? No, it's probably not everyone. But I think that so far I have a good indication that it's a direction that the city may want to look at. It would also not be as confusing to the public. If someone's coming in to build commercial property in Dickinson, they would know these are the standards this is what you need to do. It doesn't matter if it's east side of town, south side of town, wherever, this would be the standard set in place. It also falls into our adoption of light standards. The light standards are a different, they provide a whole different view. If you go by Thrifty White, and Thrifty White looks like Thrifty White up north, yes, but if you drive by it and look at that, at night, during the day, whenever, it does give you a different feel. And you're going to see those light standards start popping up on redevelopments that are happening. And I'm trying to see if the city, if we're going to, I've been working with Sean in the downtown park, we're going to look at maybe introducing, maybe propose to introducing one of each kind of a light standards in that particular park, just to use it as a showcase of what they actually look like. We do have some variety of those lighting fixtures that we can use in downtown locations that, you know, we can use with the buildings, tall buildings, and we can use them with canopies and what have you. There's different light standards that we can use in those locations. Anyway, I just wanted to start this dialogue because I think that it is important. My vision for the city is that we have some better continuity throughout the entire city. Part of it would be commercial development, part of it would be the lighting. I think we're still at a size that we can actually pull this off. You know, I shared, I think Shirley and I visited on this, you know, everyone talks about Fargo as an example of this or that. And, you know, not being from North Dakota originally, I don't use Fargo as my idea of what we need to shoot for. Fargo has some good things that they've done. Downtown Bismarck has done some good things. If they were going to embark on this kind of a project, we'll call it, they probably couldn't do it because they're too spread out already. So they would probably never get to that point where they have that continuity. We aren't yet. We actually have the ability to do it, and I think it would be a great time to get it in place, because as we can become busy again, when developments are going crazy, it would be great to have it, just like our standards for cell towers that Stephen mentioned. It would be great because it would just be listed. It would be things that people would be required to do, required to bring in. It wouldn't necessarily be items that would be discussed at this board. You know, you'd acknowledge it, you'd see the plans, you'd say, yes, it looks great, it meets the intent. The staff would review it from the standpoint that it would actually meet the intent of our code and move forward. So with that, I'll be quiet, and I'd like to get some input from you guys.
All right, thanks, Walter. Any comments, questions for Walter?
I like the idea of conformity in our historic areas, downtown. Outside of that, I'm not sure I'm a fan. We don't want the city to look like Phoenix, Arizona, where every building is the same color, the same glass, the same design. I mean, I take buildings that I look around town now. You take like Highlands Engineering, very modern, contemporary looking building. In this ordinance, that wouldn't conform with the adjacent properties. They would have to, I mean, it's not earth tone colors, it's blue. And
Blue qualified.
I think we're taking too much control here again. Downtown, I'm totally for it, you know, to preserve the historic view. You know, if you're going to build a new building, it should look like something that's been here for a long time in our downtown area. Outside of that, in these new commercial subdivisions, people want contemporary look. Some people might want a traditional look. Some people might want something different. I don't see how we tell them we want every building to look fairly close to the same and only be earth tone colors.
Any other comments?
When we did this, the intent was to protect the gateways. You know, we didn't do it over wide swaths of land. The intent was to protect the gateways, to dress them up a little bit. Now, I don't know if there's enough flexibility in here or not. You know, I guess we could address that, but I still think that's really important, to protect the gateways. Walt told me about this the other day. about the idea of expanding it to all commercially zoned properties. And I guess I didn't say it to you, but I have heard complaints over the years about the requirements of our overlay district, about it adding cost and all that. And you know, I don't know how widespread those complaints are, but it's not hard for me to support it in the gateways at all. One thing, and I'm digressing a little bit, but I didn't realize until you and I talked the other day that this only applies to commercial owned property. I thought our overlay district applied to both commercial and industrial. And again, I know I'm digressing, but I think along the gateways, I think it should apply to industrial as well as commercial.
Commissioner Jackson, no, you're correct, it does apply to industrial, but the strategy of the city has been within that 300 feet to, the preference is to approve commercial property
So I
zoning.
understand that.
But yeah, it would apply to industrial also.
So our overlay district does include
Yes.
both commercial
The only
and
use it
industrial?
doesn't apply to is residential.
Okay, I stand corrected. That's good.
I think the area that we were talking about, though, up north, Stephen, was an area where you have a commercial buffer, right? That was, right, the 300-foot was a commercial buffer.
Right, and I know we tried to do that, but there will probably come times when we do have industrial right up to a gateway, and I guess it's good to know that it does.
Yes, there are instances, and that's in the county. The county has similar, similar overlay district with industrial right on 22, and if anyone came in with any new development, then they would need to meet those,
Okay.
those
Well, that's
those
good to know.
standards. But yeah, it's anything that's non-residential, anything that's non-residential. It excludes residential and agricultural uses. But yeah, if there's a, but again, as you said, the city's strategy has been along 22 and along those corridor areas is to prefer in commercial zoning right on the corridor within
But I
that
do
300
think that's
feet.
only been a practice. I don't think that's in our code.
Yeah, it's a preference.
Just a
It's a preference and it's a practice.
Yeah. And anyway, as to this, I'm sure open to discussing it. But I do think we have to be careful with it, because I have had negative comments over the last couple, 3 years about what we've done even within the 300 feet. I've never felt like it, what am I trying to say? That it encourages buildings that look the same. Maybe it does, I don't know, but I've never felt that way. What does it say?
Consistent
with
the traditional feature.
adjoining properties.
Well,
So if you,
I don't read that as making the buildings the same, but maybe it does, I don't know.
I mean, if the adjoining properties are very standard looking buildings and you wanted to come and put something ultra modern in, which is pretty much the design now, you take Baker Hughes. I mean, if we've had this in place, how did Baker Hughes build that building and Halliburton build a square tin box? I mean, how come we didn't stop that?
But I don't think it was in place when they did their work. We just missed that.
Is there, along the corridors, I agree. The building should not look like a steel building that's just a tin box with a tin roof on the top.
That's my big concern.
But I don't think we need to restrict people's designs. I mean, if they look nice, I think they should be allowed. I don't like the wording where they got to conform with adjacent properties. I think each building should be on a case-by-case basis. I mean, there's different architects that design different things all the time.
Well, I think we are looking at it.
Yeah, I don't
Building by building,
think the intent is to make sure that they all look exactly the same. The intent is that they have different architectural facades that are displayed out front that meet that criteria of earth tone type development. And I think that, you know, the other side you need to look at is at that, my example of the 300 feet. If you're within that 300 feet, you meet it. If you're at 310 feet, you don't. Now, the gentleman that builds the structure in the 300 foot, he has to meet that. I guarantee you, isn't going to be excited about what the gentleman can do right behind him that will degrade his property potentially for what he can actually build. So I think there's two ways to look at it. I don't know that, you know, the cost involved, you know, really these design standards are not a real costly item. They're items that people would want on a general basis to just make their business appeal, to have curbside appeal to the public or their clients coming in. So I don't know that, you know, I come from a background of design reviews where every building used to come through a board just like yourself for every building that was either built or remodeled. Now that would be, I think, not in the realm of where we are right now for the city of Dickinson for architectural review. I think if it just meets the intent of different facade material, some of the other design options, which, you know, promoting buildings to be built to the front of the lot, parking on the sides and the rear, that's kind of a basic design standard that promotes walkability, promotes just more interesting commercial areas rather than a sea of asphalt in front of every building too. So I mean, it all kind of ties together. So I mean, it's kind of a design concept that allows the community to grow and allows it to grow maybe, yes, in a little different way. I think there's a lot of flexibility there. I don't think that there's I don't think it's heavy-handed at all as far as design requirements. And, you know, right now, we also don't require people, if you're not doing over 50% of improvement, you're not required to do any of that. So, you know, you see I've been working with a number of folks that have been doing Burger King, good example. They have incorporated meeting this standard on their side, not because we require them or not because we can even require them to do it, because they want to. And so, you know, my dialogue with them was basically, you're doing an improvement to this building that's probably going to be here for 20 years. I said, this is what we're working on. We're trying to get this. Walmart, they're scheduled for a 3 to 5 year upgrade of their facility. Not right now. They're going to do some sign stuff and I visited with their architect already. They're on board with doing this. They're on board with doing what you see right here. I think it's an opportunity to, and they really should have done this when they came in. I don't know when they came in versus when this was adopted, but they really didn't. It was before, too. But they're on board with doing it. They're actually on board with taking the ugliest side of their building, which is the auto center and the storage area and the outdoor area, and doing something to try to fit in. So I think that I think if you have this straightforward plan, straightforward architectural plan, and straightforward requirements that people know before they start doing those projects, they're not going to argue it. They're really not.
I think it also protects the developer too from whatever the flavor of the month is and whatever we determine to be architectural review. It's like there's something set in stone that they have those rules to follow. But does it normally come that the architect will design something and then they see this, or they're seeing this as a set of rules in order to create their architectural design for it?
How it's supposed to work is they're supposed to, you know, before they go design something, they would make contact with Steve and myself, building department, whatever. They would have some dialogue with us as far as what, and that's how I got engaged with some of these other projects that are going on, because that's what they did. They called. They would then get a copy of that, what our expectations are, and they would go back and do a design. Now, you know, we don't really want to be the design police. My background's in architecture and landscape architecture, and I could pick apart what I think is nice. That's not what this is about. It's about picking a design that meets the intent of this standard. And it's pretty broad. really is. It's pretty broad. You can design something pretty easily that meets the intent of this standard. And it's not going to encumber or slow that project down, and it really isn't going to add. Probably if you would have them design something without any standards, let's say we got rid of the overlay zones, and most of the people would come in and say, well, you know, what should we design to? Because they literally would come in and ask, what kind of a design would we want? So I mean, there's two ways to look at it. Most of the developers want a little bit of guidance as far as what, and a little assurance, knowing what's going to go behind them or next to them or, you know, 200 feet away from them. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that.
But we're going to adopt this for everything, industrial and commercial in every district.
That's my discussion item.
So Joe's Radiator Shop out in the Dickinson, the one out west of town, the industrial park where Baker Boy's at, wants to build a new building on his lot. The face of the front of it's going to have to be brick, stone, architecturally. I mean, he can't just build anything, just a steel building like he's had for...
If it's commercial. If it's on commercial.
I thought this was industrial too.
No, this is strictly
The overlay
commercial.
district is industrial also.
So this would
up
only
there.
be the overlay district?
No.
No.
It would just be, if I understand it right, this would be the areas beyond the 300 feet that's covered in the overlay district that are zoned commercial, not industrial.
Commercial only.
But that's what gives me a little pause too. Same thing that Jason just said. You know, would I like to see it? Yeah, I'd love to see that with everything. And of course, the developer's got his choice. He can put covenants on his property as he develops it, if he wants it to be that way. But it does give me a little pause for us to jump in. And I've never read these being very restrictive. I really don't. And I don't know, Jason, unless you know examples where it's making buildings look the same. I've never felt that it did that. And if it does, maybe we need to massage it a little bit. I don't know.
The discretion of whoever's reviewing the plan.
It does do that.
I mean, whatever their view of the day is.
It does do that.
I don't like that. I mean,
Yeah.
Walter might like brown buildings. Maybe the next guy likes green buildings.
I think there's a lot of truth to that part of it.
It's as strong as whoever's policing it, yeah.
But I don't think that's been a problem.
Well,
But potentially could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, unless you get really way more detailed, I'm not sure how you get around that.
Well, you look at the new Cornerstone Bank. You know, it meets the intent of this.
Yeah.
And it's a little different, you know, and it's a different color scheme, and it's a different design.
I suspect there's covenants out there.
I would suspect there also.
But it meets the intent of this.
And so how do you differentiate between, I think we're talking about like the self-sustaining entrepreneur trying to build a building versus McDonald's or somebody else who either has corporate funds or something like that and has standard architectural design. It meets a lot of things, a lot of places. And so
Yeah.
you're saying like Joe's Radiator place may not be able to meet that, but you know, he's got enough money to put the building up and that's about it, so that he can expand his workforce to whatever it may be, but it's kind of more like subsistence.
Yeah, it's
for
hard to distinguish between
and not
Joe
just-
and McDonald's. You can't really do that in any land use type.
But I don't think we should.
Administration.
Oh, absolutely, I agree.
Not
I
in our
mean,
neighborhoods.
but what you can do for Joe is you can make Joe give you a timeline, a schedule of improvement of when he would actually be finishing that project. So, I mean, Joe could get ready. He could get half of it done or a third of it done or something of it done and give us the assurance that he's going to move forward with the rest of it. Now, if he doesn't, are we going to have Jen take him to court? I don't know that we are, but when Joe wants to come back in and get another building permit to do something else or whatever, then we will remind Joe that he would need to conform to what he said he was going to do. So it isn't an overnight, this isn't an overnight solution. I mean, it's a long-term solution. The corporate people, you're right, it's easier, because McDonald's is gonna come in, they're gonna look at this, and they're gonna go, okay, do it, and it'll be done.
I know there are
It's-
communities that, you know, they're far more urban than we are, that have far more strict requirements than this. But doesn't mean we should necessarily do it.
Any other comments, suggestions? See, everybody's on the same page.
I think it's a really good document, I do. I think it protects both sides. It's just a matter of discretion on who's going to be doing the policing for it. So I don't find it as that
Well,
restrictive.
I think the question is, though, do we want to move these restrictions to a place that's 1,000 feet off our gateway, back in the middle of a commercial development someplace? And I think that's what you're saying, Jason. And that is, you know, what I brought up to you the other day. That's to me the question, whether we want to reach that far. I think you can argue that there's great public good in protecting our gateways, but then when you get to a certain point, I don't know.
Commissioners, I guess the one comment, Steve Josephson, City County Planner, that I would have is there might be places where having these restrictions would be more appropriate. We have a number of commercial areas that are adjacent to residential areas, and perhaps in those areas, you know, looking at design standards, you know, so it softens the effect of having commercial development in the general vicinity is one thing, but then we have some areas that are, say, general commercial that are adjacent to, you know, industrial areas where perhaps, you know, perhaps protecting, you know, the visual impacts of it are, you know, given the nature of the businesses that are there, the surrounding properties that are there, that's a different thing. And I think that's one of the things we worked into this was looking at what was in the surrounding, you know, looking at what was in the surrounding areas, so that the appearance of commercial buildings would not, you know, it wouldn't be a stark contrast to whatever is in there. Trust me, we do get phone calls from time to time of people saying, you know, this new thing came in. It's very rare, but we do get phone calls from people saying this new business came in, and I really hate this, and it's, you know, we don't like the color, or we don't like this, and it's like, well, you know, that may be true, but, you know, they're entitled, you know, they're entitled to build this however they, you know, as long as it meets our zoning and building code requirements. I think that might be the thing to consider, is what is immediately around the area, what's it adjacent to. So putting a new commercial building in, say, general commercial that's adjacent to general industrial area, you know, the design and appearance of that may be a little bit, that's a different consideration than, say, if you did it in those commercial areas that are, say, right behind the mall. So that's just a thought.
I've got an example. What about Ebeltoft Sickler's Law Office and Consolidated's building? How would that conform in this? Consolidated doesn't have anything but steel siding on that thing. Ebeltoft Sickler's is all stucco and a totally different design, prairie style design compared.
Well, you know why that's a good example, Jason, is because that's not on a gateway. So what we have now doesn't apply to those two buildings. They're not on a gateway. So those must be zoned commercial, light commercial or CC or whatever, I suppose.
You know, my concern more would be, I mean, we allowed them to go from R1 to commercial across, I mean, within 50 feet.
So that's an example of where we maybe should make a change.
I mean, I would rather see the zoning change than, I mean, that's probably a place that the zoning should have never been allowed. Because, I mean, typically, it's R1, R2, R3, maybe some light commercial, but I mean, we went right from R1 to commercial. Just because of where it was at, I guess. I'm not sure.
I had a question for Walter. So these standards would just apply to the overlay corridor district right now. But if you had some CC property, not on those entrance corridors, none of this applies right today.
Right, that's correct.
I just, I don't know where all our CC property is, but we've had some interest from development in some GC property, and it's between the East Business Loop and East Villard. Jerome's Distributing just added on to their building that, they did some architectural things. I think it looks pretty nice. But there's some property back there. I always thought that was industrial for forever. It's not. It's general commercial. So would it be appropriate to just say community commercial, or just apply it to certain areas like we did with the overlay district? This neighborhood is different than this neighborhood over here, even though they might be zoned the same, and pick and choose as the board to pick some of those commercial properties out in neighborhoods. That's what we did with the overlay corridors. We said here, 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 and here, and pick those.
Jerome's, they upgraded the front of the office part of that building, but the rest of the building, even street side, is tip-up concrete walls. That has no design element to it. Now, would we require them to brick that whole side then with this?
We'd require them to deal with the front.
That's what I'm saying. Their office, and then they added on straight, but it's all street side. The east elevation would all be street side, so they would have another 200 feet of building probably that would either have to be brick or stucco or.
That's what it would be. But I guess, the other examples you gave were on Fairway. I'd never thought about that, and maybe that is something that at least we do the CC and the LC, and that would be a step toward it. The general commercial, I'm hesitating with that still.
Well, those are nice buildings over there. Do they fit right there? I never was a fan of why that would ever got approved, but
Scott one.
Yeah, sure I did, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I'd ask you to look at the corridor too itself. The 300-foot on Highway 22 isn't really effective.
I think the thought was that intersection. The other three quadrants of the intersection are not residential. And I think the thought was, in the law offices there, I don't think there's anything, an issue there. The other building, yeah, had been done better.
I guess I'd like you to just go out and drive around, look at the commercial areas, look at how it affects now, 300 feet from Highway 22, what that actually affects. Not a lot. There's not a lot that it actually does affect.
and I agree 300 feet is pretty short, maybe on our overlay districts there, our gateways into town. Most lots are 300 feet probably, if they're bigger lots,
I think it's worthy of us discussing this and saying,
Absolutely.
and saying, what do we really want? Because we can't do this when there's a room full of people pounding on the
Right.
table to move
Yep.
forward on projects. So I think it's very timely, and, by next month, it would be great to, I just need a direction. I just think it's worthwhile to discuss and look at areas. Maybe we expand the boundaries, maybe we, whatever, come back with 25 options.
But
And
there's new buildings within the last 3 years along 22 in our corridor that don't meet this. That are, they've got some brick on the office part of it, but there's a lot of building that faces the street that's a steel siding, steel sheet siding. How far do you take this? There's a lot of buildings. Baker Hughes' shop. There's a couple hundred feet of shop there that faces the street.
We didn't have the overlay order in place when those two buildings were done.
Lufkin. Look at all those buildings along that corridor.
and Lufkin's outside of our jurisdiction.
Yeah, and I believe Commissioner Jackson, wasn't it, was it 2012 when the corridor, early 2012 when the corridors?
I don't
I
remember
think
the
that
date.
it was either 11 or 12.
Well, we missed some, there's no question. And Lufkin is, I believe, outside the ETZ. So, yeah, you know, I don't think we should drop this either. You know, I've often thought that the 300 feet maybe could be bumped a little bit, because I do feel strongly about the corridors. And you know, maybe the LC and the CC, maybe that's something we should do immediately. To me, that's kind of a no-brainer.
We'll just drive around. I mean, honestly, if you have that in your mind and you're driving around, look at what we have, and then look and see if it's the direction that you want it to go.
Keep pushing us on it.
So next month, we will visit on this again, and next month, Craig's going to do a lot of talking too, probably, because we're going to talk about the subdivision ordinance, I think. So we have some applicants that didn't make our agenda, and so we'll actually have more time for this kind of discussion, so we probably will jump into the subdivision ordinance.
All right, any other
Craig will
questions?
probably go on vacation.
No other questions? Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment? Not, is there a motion for adjournment? Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion or meeting adjourned. You got 1 minute.